A new system presented by the city's Development Services Department could change the way new homes and businesses arrange to break ground for new development projects.
That's right. Our Mariah Gallegos breaks it down for us.
Some of you may be surprised to hear Corpus Christi is the 8th most populated city in all of Texas, and it's only expected to get bigger. Let me paint the picture. Since 1970, the city has added 2,500 new residents every year. And over the next decade, that number is expected to nearly double to 5,300 every year. So now the city has two questions to answer. First, where are all of these people going to live? And second, how do we keep housing and utility costs affordable? Right now, if you were to build a new home in Corpus Christi, you'd have your base costs for building that home, plus fees for water and wastewater for the city. Most of you already see these fees on your monthly utility bill. Those fees go into what is called the trust fund, money that is used by the city for new infrastructure. But that money can only be used for water and wastewater projects.
Council is considered looking at is water, wastewater, stormwater drainage, and roadway as potential options, whereas the trust fund today only looks at water and wastewater.
Is this the best way to encourage growth and maximize the money? Some city councilors say no and are proposing the city switch to an impact fee.
The difference is we, instead of generating $1 million roughly a year in Corpus, we would generate somewhere between $5 to $7 million a year based on the number of permits we issued last year.
Proponents say impact fees would look at what needs to be built in order for new development to happen. Essentially, you will be charged for what you actually need instead of an average.
Under impact fees, we can pay for master planning. We can pay for O&M, operations and maintenance. We can pay for facility expansions if we need to expand our wastewater treatment plants or those kinds of things. Relatively big difference.
But not everyone is on board with the plan. The Coastal Bend Home Builders Association sent us this statement. Quote, "We are grateful that Development Services included us in the discussions about how to best grow the city of Corpus Christi. And although we have some serious concerns about how much impact fees will increase home prices, we do recognize that the current trust fund is far from perfect." A final decision has not been made. In the next few months, the city will decide whether to transition to impact fees or not. The study will continue to be looked over and tweaked by the Developmental Services, and officials say they hope to present again to the city by April. Mariah Gallegos, 3 News.
All right, Mariah, thank you so much. Still